What happens when a heartless restaurant manager fires a pregnant waitress for checking on her sick child? What began as a nightmare for this struggling mother transformed into a miracle when Keanu Reeves stepped in. By the time this story ends, you'll be in tears seeing how one act of kindness changed 3 lives forever. Oh, and before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing your reactions in the comments. The upscale restaurant Bella Notte glittered with crystal chandeliers and fine china. Located in downtown Los Angeles, it was the type of establishment where celebrities often dined discreetly in corner booths and business deals worth millions were sealed over $200 bottles of wine. In the kitchen, 28-year-old Melissa Parker tied her apron around her 7-month pregnant belly with practiced efficiency. Dark circles shadowed her eyes from another night of minimal sleep. Her 3-year-old daughter Emma had been fighting a fever since yesterday, and Melissa had spent most of the night applying cool compresses to her forehead and checking her temperature. "You're late again, Parker," snapped Marcus Reed, the restaurant manager. At 45, Reed had worked his way up from busboy to manager over 2 decades. The journey had hardened him, stripped away whatever compassion he might once have possessed. The restaurant business was brutal, and he'd survived by becoming even more brutal. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reed. Emma's fever spiked this morning, and I had to wait for my neighbor to—" Reed held up his hand, cutting her off. "I don't need your life story. This is your 2nd late arrival this week. 1 more strike, and we'll have to reevaluate your position here." Melissa bit her lip and nodded. She couldn't afford to lose this job, not with a 2nd child on the way, and no support from either father. Emma's dad had disappeared before she was born, and this baby's father had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with them when Melissa had told him about the pregnancy. The dinner rush began promptly at 6 p.m. Melissa moved between tables with practiced grace despite her pregnancy. She'd been a waitress for 10 years and knew how to make her exhaustion invisible to customers. Her smile never faltered as she recited specials, refilled water glasses, and delivered steaming plates of pasta Alfredo and seared salmon. At 7:30 p.m., her phone vibrated in her pocket. Normally, she would never check it during a shift, but her neighbor Mrs. Castillo was watching Emma. If she was calling, something was wrong. Melissa slipped into the service hallway and pulled out her phone. 3 missed calls and a text message. "Emma's fever is 103.5. She's asking for you. Should I take her to emergency?" Her heart lurched. She quickly dialed back, keeping her voice low. "Mrs. Castillo, I'm so sorry, I was serving. How is she now?" "She's very warm, Melissa, crying for you. The fever reducer isn't working. I'll try to come check on her. The restaurant is just 2 blocks away. Can you hold on 15 minutes? Melissa ended the call and leaned against the wall, her hand protectively cradling her belly as the baby inside gave a forceful kick. She needed to check on Emma, but she also needed this job. Maybe if she explained the situation to Mr. Reed, he would let her take a quick break. She found him by the bar, reviewing the wine inventory. "Mr. Reed, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have an emergency. My daughter's fever has spiked to 103.5 and she's only 3. Our apartment is just 2 blocks away. If I could take a 15-minute break to check on her." Reed's face hardened. "Absolutely not. We're in the middle of dinner service. Please, she's burning up. My neighbor doesn't know if she should take her to the emergency room. I just need to assess her. We all have problems, Parker. You think you're the only one with responsibilities. I have a restaurant to run. If you leave now, don't bother coming back." Melissa's eyes widened. "Are you saying you'll fire me for checking on my critically ill child?" "I'm saying I need reliable staff. You've been late, distracted, and your pregnancy is already affecting your ability to carry trays efficiently. This job requires your full attention." "She's 3 years old and alone with a high fever." Reed's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Then perhaps you should be home with her instead of here. Make your choice." What neither of them realized was that in the adjacent booth, partially concealed by a decorative screen, sat Keanu Reeves. The actor had come in quietly through the side entrance, seeking a peaceful dinner away from paparazzi. He'd been enjoying his pasta primavera when the conversation reached his ears. Melissa stood frozen, her hand still resting on her belly. Then she untied her apron. "I quit," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "No job is worth my daughter's health." "Turn in your uniform before you collect your final check," Reed called after her as she walked away. "And don't expect a reference." Melissa rushed to the employee locker room, quickly changing out of her uniform into her street clothes. Tears threatened, but she blinked them back. She'd find another job, somehow. Right now, Emma needed her. As she hurried through the dining room toward the exit, a quiet voice stopped her. "Excuse me." She turned to find a man rising from a corner booth. It took her a moment to recognize him through her panicked haze. Keanu Reeves was standing there in a simple black shirt and jeans, his expression concerned. "I'm sorry, but I overheard what happened. Is your daughter okay?" Melissa was momentarily stunned, both by being addressed by the famous actor and by the genuine concern in his voice. I don't know. I need to get to her now. Please let me help. Do you need a ride?" She shook her head. "It's just 2 blocks. I can walk faster than finding a car." "Then I'll walk with you," he said, placing money on the table and grabbing his jacket. No one should face an emergency alone. Before Melissa could protest, he was beside her, holding the door open. Outside, the cool evening air hit her face, and she instinctively began walking briskly in the direction of her apartment. "You don't have to do this, Mr. Reeves," she managed to say as they hurried down the sidewalk. "I'm sure you were enjoying your dinner." "Food can wait. Children can't," he replied simply. "And please call me Keanu." They reached her apartment building, a worn structure that had seen better days. The elevator was perpetually out of service, so they climbed 3 flights of stairs. Melissa was breathing heavily by the time they reached her door, the pregnancy making the ascent more difficult. She knocked twice, then used her key. Inside, the apartment was small but meticulously clean. Children's drawings were taped to the refrigerator, and a collection of well-loved stuffed animals occupied one corner of the living room. Mrs. Castillo, a gray-haired woman in her 60s, looked up from the couch where she sat cradling Emma. The little girl's face was flushed, her blonde curls damp with sweat. "Mommy!" she whimpered, reaching out with small arms. Melissa rushed to her daughter, immediately placing her palm on the child's forehead. "She's burning up," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "Thank you, Mrs. Castillo. I can take it from here." The neighbor gathered her things, eyeing Keanu curiously but not recognizing him in her concern for the child. "I gave her the children's Tylenol at 7, but it hasn't seemed to help. Should I stay?" "No, thank you. You've done so much already. I'm taking her to the emergency room now." As Mrs. Castillo left, Melissa grabbed a small backpack and began filling it with essentials. Emma's favorite stuffed rabbit, a sippy cup, diapers, though Emma was mostly potty trained, fevers sometimes caused accidents, and an extra set of clothes. Keanu remained by the door, silent and observant. Then he spoke. "There's a children's hospital 6 blocks from here. I can call a car to take us." Melissa paused in her frantic packing. "Us?" "Unless you'd prefer I leave," he said, "but I'd like to help, if you'll allow it." Something in his gentle tone broke through her practiced independence. For once, she didn't have to handle everything alone. "Thank you," she whispered. "That would be very kind." Within minutes, a black SUV pulled up outside her building. Keanu helped carry Emma down the stairs while Melissa brought the backpack. In the car, the little girl curled up on her mother's lap, whimpering occasionally. "What's her name?" Keanu asked softly, as the driver navigated the evening traffic. "Emma," Melissa replied, stroking her daughter's damp hair. "She's usually so energetic and talkative. I've never seen her this listless." At the children's hospital, Melissa expected they would need to wait for hours, as was typical in emergency rooms. To her surprise, Keanu spoke quietly to the receptionist, and within minutes, they were shown to a private examination room. A pediatrician arrived promptly, a no-nonsense woman with kind eyes who examined Emma thoroughly. "It's a severe ear infection," she diagnosed. "That's why the fever is so persistent. We'll start her on antibiotics right away." As the doctor wrote prescriptions and arranged for the first dose of medication, Melissa felt a wave of relief so powerful it made her legs weak. She sank into a chair, one hand on her belly, the other holding Emma's small fingers. "Thank you," she said to Keanu, who stood quietly in the corner of the room. "I don't know how I would have managed this alone." He shook his head. "You would have managed. You're clearly a strong mother, but no one should have to be strong all the time." Within an hour, Emma's fever had begun to respond to the combination of antibiotics and fever reducers. Her cheeks were still flushed, but her breathing had eased, and she had fallen into a more peaceful sleep. The doctor returned with discharge instructions and prescriptions. She should start feeling better by tomorrow afternoon, but complete the entire course of antibiotics. "And you," she addressed Melissa directly, "need rest too. That baby you're carrying needs a healthy mother." Melissa nodded, though the doctor's instructions brought reality crashing back. She'd quit her job. How would she pay for these prescriptions? How would she make next month's rent? Outside the hospital, the same black SUV waited. The driver helped them in, Emma still sleeping in her mother's arms. "Where to?" Keanu asked gently. "Home, please," Melissa replied. "We've taken up enough of your evening." "There's a 24-hour pharmacy on the way," he said. "We should fill those prescriptions first." At the pharmacy, Keanu insisted on going in himself while Melissa stayed in the car with Emma. When he returned with a bag of medications, Melissa reached for her wallet. "How much do I owe you?" He waved away her question. "It's taken care of." "I can't accept that," she protested. "You've already done so much." "Consider it a loan then," he said with a small smile. "You can pay it forward someday when you're in a position to help someone else." Back at her apartment, Keanu carried the sleeping Emma up 3 flights of stairs and waited patiently as Melissa unlocked the door. Inside, he helped settle the little girl into her bed in the apartment's single bedroom. In the small living room, Melissa finally allowed herself to sink onto the worn sofa. The events of the evening, losing her job, Emma's illness, the unexpected kindness of a Hollywood star, it was all too much. Tears she'd been holding back for hours finally spilled over. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her cheeks. "This isn't your problem." Keanu sat in a chair across from her. "Everyone needs help sometimes." "I don't know what I'm going to do," she admitted. "That job was everything. The manager was awful, but the tips were good, and they provided health insurance. With the baby coming in 2 months," her voice trailed off. "May I ask about your support system?" Keanu's question was gentle, non-judgmental. Melissa gave a small, bitter laugh. "Non-existent. Emma's father left before she was born. This baby's father made it clear he wants nothing to do with us. My parents died years ago. I have friends, neighbors like Mrs. Castillo who help when they can, but no real support system." Keanu was quiet for a long moment. "I have a proposition for you," he finally said, "and please feel free to say no." Melissa looked at him warily. "I'm producing a new film that begins shooting next month. We're still filling positions for the production office. The hours are regular, the pay is good, and there's full benefits." Her eyes widened. "Are you offering me a job? You don't even know me. I have no experience in film. I know you're dedicated to your daughter. I know you chose her welfare over your job security. That tells me everything about your character. As for experience, many skills are transferable. What did you do before waitressing?" "I was in college studying business administration, but dropped out when I became pregnant with Emma. Before the restaurant, I worked as an office manager for a small accounting firm." Keanu nodded. "That's perfect, actually. The position is an administrative role. You'd be organizing schedules, managing correspondence, keeping things running smoothly. We can train you on the specifics." Melissa stared at him, searching for the catch. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" "Because I've been fortunate in my life and I believe in passing that fortune along." His expression turned thoughtful. "Also, what I witnessed tonight at the restaurant, the callousness of your manager, it bothered me. No one should have to choose between their child and their livelihood." The possibility was almost too much to hope for. When would it start? 2 weeks, and there's another thing. He hesitated. The production company owns several apartments near the studio for cast and crew. One happens to be vacant. It's a 2-bedroom with an elevator in the building. It would be available to you as part of the employment package. Melissa's hand went to her mouth. "That's too much. I can't." "You can," he said firmly, "and there's no obligation beyond doing the job well. If after the production wraps you want to move on to something else, that's entirely your choice. But it would give you stability through your pregnancy and the baby's early months." She looked around her small apartment. The cramped space, the perpetually broken elevator, the sink that never stopped dripping. Then she thought of Emma, who would soon have to share her tiny bedroom with a new sibling. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll consider it," Keanu replied. "Sleep on it. Focus on getting Emma better. Here's my card with a private number. Call me tomorrow and we can discuss details." As he stood to leave, Melissa rose too, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. "Thank you doesn't seem enough." Keanu smiled, a genuine warm expression that transformed his face. "Sometimes the greatest thanks is allowing others the opportunity to help. We're all connected in this world. The divisions between us are largely illusions." With that philosophical observation, he departed, leaving Melissa standing in her living room holding his business card, wondering if the entire evening had been a dream. It wasn't a dream. The next morning, Emma's fever was significantly reduced, and she was asking for breakfast, a sure sign she was on the mend. While the little girl ate her oatmeal, Melissa stared at Keanu's card on the kitchen counter. Could she really accept such generosity? Would it come with hidden expectations? Yet something in his manner had been so genuine, so lacking in ulterior motive. She made the call. 2 weeks later, Melissa and Emma moved into their new apartment, a sunlit space with 2 bedrooms, a modern kitchen, and wide windows overlooking a small park. The building had not only a working elevator, but a playground in the courtyard. Melissa's new job at the production office proved challenging but rewarding. Her organizational skills transferred perfectly to the film industry, and she quickly became an essential part of the production team. Her co-workers were kind and understanding when she explained her situation. The production had a family-friendly policy, a rarity in Hollywood, that allowed for flexible scheduling when family emergencies arose. More importantly, the health insurance coverage began immediately, ensuring that both Emma's ongoing care and Melissa's prenatal appointments were fully covered. 1 month into her new position, Melissa went into labor 2 weeks early. She called her supervisor from the hospital, apologizing profusely and worrying about the work she'd left unfinished. "Don't give it another thought," her supervisor assured her. "Focus on bringing that baby into the world safely. We've got everything covered here." 12 hours later, Melissa gave birth to a healthy baby boy whom she named Leo. As she cradled him in her hospital room, Emma perched carefully beside her, examining her new brother with solemn curiosity. "He's so tiny, Mommy," Emma whispered, gently touching Leo's miniature fingers. "You were this tiny once too," Melissa told her, kissing the top of her head. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. A nurse entered, carrying an enormous basket of flowers, baby supplies, and children's books. "These just arrived for you," she said, placing the basket on a side table. "There's a card." Melissa opened the envelope and read the simple message inside. "Congratulations on your new addition. Wishing you and your family all the joy in the world. KR." Tears filled her eyes as she looked at the beautiful arrangement. There was no grand gesture, no public announcement, just a quiet, thoughtful acknowledgement of this significant moment in her life. 6 weeks later, Melissa returned to work with Leo in tow. The production had set up a small nursery area in an unused office where she could keep him nearby and nurse throughout the day. Emma was enrolled in the studio's daycare program, where she was thriving among the other children. One afternoon, as Melissa was organizing the next day's shooting schedule, a familiar figure appeared in her office doorway. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Keanu said, smiling as he spotted Leo sleeping in his bassinet beside her desk. Melissa stood up, surprised and pleased to see him. "Not at all. We've been hoping you'd stop by. I wanted to thank you for the beautiful basket." "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the sleeping infant. She nodded, and Keanu approached the bassinet, looking down at Leo with gentle appreciation. "He's perfect," he said. "What's his name?" "Leonardo," Melissa replied. "Leo for short. It means brave lion. I thought he deserved a strong name, given everything we've been through." Keanu smiled. "A very fitting name." There was a noise at the door and Emma burst in, returning from daycare. She stopped short when she saw the visitor. "Hello," Keanu said, kneeling down to her level. "You must be Emma. I've heard a lot about you." Emma regarded him solemnly, then asked, "Are you the Angel Man?" Keanu looked puzzled. "The Angel Man?" Melissa laughed. "That's what she calls you. I told her about how you helped us when she was sick, and she decided you must be an angel in disguise." "Ah," Keanu said, looking back at Emma. "I'm not an angel, just a person who believes in helping others when I can." Emma considered this, then declared with the straightforward logic of a 3-year-old, "That's what angels do." Keanu couldn't argue with that. Over the following months, Melissa excelled in her position. When the film wrapped production, she was offered a permanent role with the production company. The apartment became their home, filled with laughter, occasional tears, and the normal chaos of raising 2 children. Keanu checked in occasionally, never intruding but always expressing genuine interest in how the family was doing. He brought books for Emma, who developed a surprising love of reading, and small, thoughtful gifts for Leo as he grew. 1 year to the day after that fateful night at Bella Notte restaurant, Melissa received a curious email. It was a link to a business listing. Bella Notte was for sale. The accompanying note read, "Sometimes opportunities come full circle. Your thoughts? KR." Confused, Melissa called the number on Keanu's business card. "Are you suggesting I buy a restaurant?" she asked when he answered. "Because while I appreciate the vote of confidence, I don't have that kind of money." She could hear the smile in his voice. "Not suggesting you buy it alone. I've been looking for investment opportunities, and with your background in both business administration and restaurant operations, I thought we might consider a partnership. You'd run it, make all the operational decisions. I'd be a silent partner." Melissa was speechless. "You don't have to decide now," Keanu added. "It's just something to consider." 3 months later, Bella Notte reopened under new management. Melissa had transformed the space, making it warmer, more welcoming, and, most importantly, family-friendly. A small play area occupied one corner, and the restaurant's policy explicitly stated that staff could take emergency family leave without penalty. The first person Melissa hired was Mrs. Castillo, who had recently retired and was looking for part-time work to supplement her income. The elderly woman became the restaurant's beloved hostess, greeting customers with genuine warmth. On opening night, Keanu arrived without fanfare, taking the same corner booth where he'd sat a year earlier. This time, however, he wasn't alone. He'd brought several friends from the industry, all of whom ordered generously and tipped extravagantly. Near the end of the evening, Melissa finally had a moment to join him at his table. "So," he said, "how does it feel to be the boss?" She smiled, confidence radiating from her in a way that hadn't been there a year ago. "It feels right," like everything has come full circle. And the children? Emma started kindergarten last week. She's already teaching the other kids to read, and Leo just took his first steps yesterday. You've built something beautiful, Keanu observed, gesturing around the bustling restaurant. Not just this place, but your life. Melissa looked around the restaurant, at the happy customers, the content staff, the warm atmosphere she'd created. Then she thought of her apartment, where Emma and Leo would be sleeping soundly under Mrs. Castillo's watchful eye. I had help, she said simply, from someone who taught me that sometimes the greatest kindness is believing in another person's potential. You always had the potential, Keanu replied. You just needed a moment of grace to reveal it. As if on cue, the door opened, and Marcus Reed, Melissa's former manager, walked in. He stopped short when he recognized her, his expression cycling through surprise, embarrassment, and discomfort. Melissa approached him with professional courtesy. Good evening, Mr. Reed. Table for one? Reed cleared his throat. I didn't realize you were involved with this place now. I can go elsewhere. Nonsense, Melissa said smoothly. Everyone is welcome here. We have a lovely table by the window. As she led him to his seat, Reed finally spoke. I should apologize for what happened last year. It was unprofessional of me. Melissa smiled. Actually, I should thank you. If you hadn't fired me that night, I might never have found my true path. Life has a way of closing doors so better ones can open. She seated him and signaled a waitress to bring water. As she turned to leave, Reed called after her. Parker, you've done well for yourself. Thank you, she replied. And it's Melissa. Back at Keanu's table, she recounted the interaction, laughing at the irony of the situation. You're more generous than I would be, Keanu observed. I might have been tempted to remind him of his words that night. Melissa shook her head. What would be the point? Living well is its own reward. Besides, she added with a smile, I've learned from a master of quiet kindness. Keanu raised his glass in a silent toast. What began as a nightmare for a struggling mother had transformed into an unexpected journey of growth, opportunity, and second chances. Melissa had learned that sometimes when life is at its darkest, help can come from the most unexpected sources. And sometimes, a single act of kindness can change the trajectory of not just one life, but many. As for Keanu Reeves, he continued his quiet philanthropy, never seeking recognition or praise. He believed that the true measure of a person isn't found in their fame or fortune, but in how they treat others when no cameras are rolling. Emma grew up believing in angels disguised as ordinary people. Leo grew up knowing that true strength lies in kindness. And Melissa built a business founded on the principle that no one should ever have to choose between their family and their livelihood. The story of that night spread quietly through Hollywood, not as tabloid fodder, but as a whispered reminder that real heroes don't wear capes or star in action films. Sometimes, they simply appear when they're needed most, offering a helping hand and asking nothing in return. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more inspiring stories. And share in the comments. Has a stranger's kindness ever changed your life? Remember, we're all connected in this world, and sometimes the smallest actions create the greatest ripples.